Hey everyone, this is Nathan Williams with blackcurrant79.com, and I'm back here with another hand history review for you guys. So today's hand was sent to me by Caleb from the US. As you guys can see there, he has pocket kings on the button in a 5-handed 1 cent, 2 cent game. This hand was played on the Winning Poker Network. So let's jump right into the action right there. So villain 6 comes in for the 2.5x raise to 5 cents. Now, the info that Caleb gave me on this player is that he's essentially an unknown opponent, so we're not going to have any kind of HUD data or stats to go off with this kind of player. Normally, I do have HUD stats on the screen when I'm playing online poker, which allows me to make reads. There'll be a link in the description below if you want to learn more about the tools that I use in that regard. But many times we're just playing, especially if you play Zoom online or if you're just playing on a new poker site, for instance, you might not have anything to go on, and so that's kind of the case here, and we're just going to have to kind of play this hand in a vacuum against basically an unknown opponent. Okay, so it gets on to Caleb here on the button. I think you guys already know what we're going to be doing here. I don't really have to explain this too deeply. We have pocket kings, second best hand in the game, on the best seat at the table, which is the button. So we want to be raising here pretty much 100% of the time at the micros. Once again, guys, you can throw all that GTO stuff out the window at the micros in a spot like this. You don't want to be balancing your ranges in a situation like this. You just want to be re-raising for value literally 100% of the time against the lower level thinking opponents you face at these stakes. You don't need to be balancing anything for trickery or deception to get action in future streets. You don't need to be thinking about the meta game or anything of that sort. We need to just be playing our hands as straightforward and simply as possible, as I've talked about in my books a million times on my blog. This is how I've created some of the highest winnings of all time in these games, is by just simply doing the most simple and obvious, brain dead, if you want to call it, play possible. So I'm going to highly agree with Caleb's decision here to 3-bet to 24 cents. I think that his sizing is also good. Should mention that Caleb is deep stacked here, but everyone else is sitting on just 100 big blinds, so the effective stack size in this hand is still 100 big blinds. So excellent bet sizing as well. 3-betting, of course, as I just ranted about, is definitely the right play here 100% of the time. Both blinds get out of the way, and it's back on villain 6. Remember, this is an unknown opponent. So he makes the call. So what kind of range should we put him on here? Well, again, unknown opponent. It's kind of hard to place him on a range, but we'll just assume that this is a reasonable thinking player. I don't really like to, think too highly of most players at the micros. It's not an arrogance thing or anything. It's just these are the lowest stakes. You typically run into the weakest players, right? So I don't like to, versus an unknown player here, I'm going to assume that they're maybe not a huge fish, but maybe not the best player either, just a typical low-stakes player. So typical low-stakes players are going to call out of position with a lot of hands, which is a large mistake in poker, called a pre-flop 3-bet out of position with a large amount of hands. So I do expect this player to have a whole host of, decent premium-type hands. But I also expect them to call out of position with all sorts of borderline speculative stuff like Broadway hands with a king-queen, some sort of suited ace, like an ace-10 suited, suited connectors, all sorts of stuff that a more skilled player at higher stakes would either 4-bet or fold. But again, this is the micros here. They don't fold to 3-bets too often. So we put this player in a reasonably wide range of hands. We don't need to assume he's some huge whale, so we're not going to assume that he's going to have some sort of hand like ace 8-5 offsuit or something. We're going to assume some level of intelligence here, but again, a reasonably wide range because this is the micros. So let's go to a flop. So, it's a reasonable flop for our hands. It's one of those paired flops with Jack 8 with the heart draw there. We have the king of hearts in our hand, is important to note. Overall, it's not the greatest flop in the world, but it's certainly not the worst either. It's pretty hard to hit that flop. Villain 6 does check to us, so I think that just going back on what I already mentioned pre-flop, I think that just making the most straightforward kind of play here is definitely the right decision. We don't want to be getting tricky, guys, at these stakes. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but FPS or fancy play syndrome is death to your winnings at these limits. Please just trust me on that point. So Caleb agrees, and he makes a bet of 30 cents. I do like 30 cents in this spot. I often harp in these videos and in my books on my blog about, how we need to be betting a lot more at the micros typically as well. But in this spot here, on a board like this, which is extremely hard to hit, I actually do like Caleb's decision to go for more of a 2/3 pot bet here, because I want to make it easier for him to call with a whole host of, pocket pairs, like maybe a pocket sevens, a pocket nines, maybe even just make some sort of loose call here with a hand like, I don't know, ace 10 or something that has some pretty weak equity, but a low stakes, micro stakes kind of player might make another poor call out of position with a hand like that. So whereas if we bet 45 cents, basically what I'm saying is if we bet 45 cents, we maybe make a player like that make a correct decision with an ace 10 or a pocket sevens, for instance. So I really do like the 30 cents here. I think it basically just entices a lot of hands that we have, a ton of equity against, like those two hands, to maybe make a poor decision here, make a call. So villain 6 does make the call. Let's go to the turn. So the turn is another excellent card for our hand, because now it is so unbelievably unlikely that we are ever behind in this situation. This is also a really nice situation at the micros, because a lot of players will overplay an ace high hand here, because they're going to be making the exact same assumption that you have absolutely nothing on this board. There's no chance you ever have a jack or an 8, and therefore you're just trying to blow them off a chop, for instance. So villain 6 does make the check, and I really like making another bet here for all of these reasons. And once again, I like going for a smaller bet to entice all of these hands, like an ace 10, for instance, to continue making poor decisions in this hand. I don't like betting 80 cents or something like that here, which would actually kind of pot commit us. I like just making a half pot bet or something at this point to continue to allow him to make significant mistakes with well ahead of in this spot. So, but Caleb decides actually to check back in this spot here, and I do think that that's a reasonably big mistake. I think that we're just sort of allowing a lot of hands off the hook here. I understand maybe Caleb's making that play for deception value, something I talk about in my latest book, the Micro Stakes Playbook, to maybe get more action on the river. But I just think that against an unknown player at the micros here, I think they're going to make another poor decision with pocket nines here if we just make a bet of 50 cents. So I definitely do prefer a bet on the turn there. But anyways, let's just move along to the river here. It does come with the 7. Now it is important to note that the flush does come in here, and we actually do lose to a flush now in this spot. Let's see what villain 6 does first. Villain 6 decides to go all in. And now we're kind of in one of these gross situations where I kind of really don't know what to say, guys, because it's one of these spots where, I'm just going to be betting the turn almost all the time in a spot like this. And it kind of just makes my decisions more or less a slam dunk on the river, because I really just don't, he doesn't have much left in his stack, and we'd be getting like 4 or 5 to 1. And I'm just not going to be really folding too often. But in a spot like this, where, as you guys can see there, we're only getting 1.72 to 1 on the pot, it makes it one of those spots where I think we have to throw our hand away, but I don't know if we should. It's just, guys, it's one of those gross spots. And something I've talked about many, many, many times before, especially in these videos, is just not getting yourself in these positions in the first place. And that's why I harp on the fundamentals so much. I think that betting the turn again at the micros there is just a standard value bet versus bad players like this who don't fold. And when we just make the standard plays at the micros, we are just never in a spot like this to begin with. So it is difficult for me to comment on these hands sometimes, a hand like this, because it's just not how I would play the hand personally. So I would never be in this spot, essentially, on the river is what I'm saying. I'm going to agree with Caleb's decision here to fold on the river, because once again, we're not getting great odds. We are technically behind a flush now. I don't really know what to say. It's very difficult to know where we're at in this hand, if this player is capable of making a big bluff here. Again, my sort of reasoning with a lot of hands like this is just don't get yourself involved in this situation in the first place. Make these standard decisions at all stages of the hand at the micros, as I've talked about many times. This is how I've had massive success at these stakes, is just not getting fancy ever and just making the the play that just seems totally brain dead, and like, how can somebody not see what I'm doing here? But they don't see. That's the thing, is like, we're dealing with very sort of low level, beginner level players for the most part at these stakes. And so that's why I always talk about just making the most obvious play is usually the best play, because they'll overthink it. You know, they'll think, oh, he's got to be bluffing me somehow. No, actually, we have pocket kings. We're not bluffing. Anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on this hand. Is I kind of don't know about the river. I would agree with Caleb's decision to fold, but my big thing is just don't put ourselves in that spot in the first place. But as always, I want to know what you guys think about this hand. There definitely might be some people who would play this a different ways, so let me know your thoughts in the comments, how you would have played this hand. I think probably pre-flop everyone's going to agree with 3-betting, but on the flop, the bet sizing, and especially on the turn, I think there definitely might be some opinions on how to play that hand in this spot, or on the turn, and also, of course, the river. You know, depending if we don't bet the river, like Caleb decided to do in this hand, what is your play on the river when the guy shoves in an overbet and the flush came in, and also the straight came in, I should mention too. 9-10 did get there. So I think it's a fairly interesting hand. I think that there's definitely different ways to play it, but I definitely prefer the standard way of playing this. And then I think the hand pretty much just plays itself if we just play it the standard way by betting the turn, and then the river is kind of a slam dunk. So anyways, though, I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts on this. Let me know yours in the comments below. As always, if you guys enjoy watching microstakes, poker, hand history reviews like this and strategy videos, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel as well, because I'm putting out videos just like this all the time. And lastly, if you guys want to know my complete strategy on how I crush these low stakes microstakes games, make sure you grab a copy of my free poker cheat sheet. It's called Massive Profit at the Micros. It's the top link in the description below, and that'll give you my complete strategy, and that'll give you my step-by-step guide on crushing these games. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. This has been Nathan Williams with BlackRain79.com.